So now I want to introduce our first speaker. I'm really excited about this, Levi from Zalando. When I was first starting to plan this event, I reached out to some people I knew in the Backstage community, David, who's the CEO of Roadie. And I said, who should I talk to about Backstage? And he immediately suggested Levi and Zalando and said that they have one of the most impressive Backstage implementations he knows of. So I'm really excited to hear about what they're going to share with us today. So Levi, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Nice meeting you, and thank
Yep.
you so much for the invitation and for having me here today. Pretty much excited. Unfortunately, I could not make a trip to San Francisco. I'm based in Germany, in Berlin, but yeah, very excited to talk with you. So let me talk a little bit about what we've been doing here at Zalando, and we have something that we call Sunrise. Which is basically our starting point for all developers, which is powered by Backstage. A little bit of myself. I am, as you know, Levi. I'm the head of builder productivity. My teams have the mission to basically empower anyone involved on the process of building software so that they can focus on their customers and partner experiences, and reduce or streamline the workflows and reducing cognitive load, removing frictions from the software development lifecycle. So my teams are basically around focus around different parts of the journey that was presented a little bit before, from the CI/CD platform to the delivery part of the workflow, to also the discoverability part, which is owned by or delivered by the developer portal that we have. Some of my experiences are from Shopify or Rocket Internet. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So what is Zalando? Zalando is basically the biggest fashion tech company in Europe. We have more or less 14.7 billion euros GMV, with more than 50 million active customers, more than 5.8 thousand brands are part of our product offering, and we're basically taking the lead on the fashion industry in Europe. We are providing software services such as an e-commerce website, but also other products around marketing solutions, outlets, connected retail, fulfillment. We have fulfillment centers across Europe and other services like that. We have 5 tech hubs in Europe, with more than 2,000 people involved on the process of building software, or people in tech, from more than 100 different nations, divided into 220 different teams or delivery teams. And we have something around 4.5 thousand microservices. And this is actually a picture of our application landscape at Zalando. So it's quite of a complex environment, and you might have imagined, how do you actually manage this? Right? Like how do you know if an incident happens on this little dot on the right corner of the image happens, what systems are going to be impacted by that, and what is actually going to be the customer impact? Or even if you need to upgrade an API and you need to deprecate an endpoint, how do you actually reach the teams to actually communicate and do migration plans and so on and so on? And that's where my team is focused on actually, like, the discovery part of our application landscape, and where we actually decided to, a few years ago, in the beginning of the Backstage era in 2020, when Backstage was released, to actually onboard ourselves into Backstage. So Sunrise is our internal platform, which is based on Backstage. So how has Sunrise helped us into actually, understand our systems and our landscape and so on and so on? Well, we had a little bit of history. We had a developer portal before where you could find some information, where you could had a few pipelines, details, and some documentation pages. Also some central hubs that you could connect to different products as a homepage. And then in 2020, we decided to actually invest into a way where we could actually um, centralize the whole software life cycle into one portal. And this was built before with the technology that we had in 2019, which was called Mosaic, which was a front-end framework, which, it's open source, so you can still find information about this today. But we decided to move away from the developer console that we had because of some of the problems that we had. One of the biggest problems that we had is that onboarding into our product was quite difficult. There was a huge learning curve. People were not really able to contribute features into the system that easily. There was no easy way to share components and so on and so on. And this generated basically like a big fragmented internal developer tooling where we had more than 120 applications that were needed to actually write software and so on and so on. So then we decided to actually focus on the area of how do we actually can easily onboard new people to or new teams to actually provide plugins to our developer portal? How can we make them easily interoperable? How we can actually share components and be able to standardize our offering? And also, how do we, in the end, have less fragmentation? So that's how, the whole story of Sunrise started. And it was almost about time where Backstage was introduced on the open source, and when we decided to, let's use actually our backstage to make Sunrise, which would be our daily start point for builders. So we wanted really people to come into our portal and be so amazed by it, and so it would provide such useful information that they would use our portal actually every day, and then have like a less fragmented experience and be able to collaborate and actually be able to discover the information that they needed. So we provided a way to centralize all the tooling, all information, all the access to resources in a way that is consistent, in a way that is accessible, and also in a way that is beautiful, and it's also engaging for our users. And we make it in a way that also it's not like we treated two customers, the engineers that were actually needing to build software in Zalando, but also in a way where people in infrastructure, in DevOps, they could also contribute to it, so that we would not become the bottleneck when we actually would um, want to integrate new features and we want to deliver new experiences for our engineers. So we really focus a lot into creating a easy to use, easy to onboard experience when using Backstage, so that we could then also provide a way that they could connect with their customers, their own internal customers, also providing behavior insights and so on and so on. So having those two customers as central to the platform as a multi-sided platform. Our mission was to basically integrate the whole builder experience, and builder is what we say anyone involved on the process of building software by the end of 2024. So let's see how we're going so far. So today in Sunrise, we have around 43% of the whole engineering teams and are actually using Sunrise daily. 75% are using it weekly, and we have around 60% of the whole landscape of tooling, infrastructure resources, events, AWS resources, documentation, CI/CD, machine learning, and so on, so integrated into the Sunrise platform in Backstage. And we also bridged recently the gap where we actually have more people beyond the engineering teams utilizing our instance of Backstage. So we have around 300 more people actually using our instance of Backstage Sunrise on a monthly basis. And we have had 99 people contributing across Zalando to our instance of Backstage, and we have 36 self-built plugins so far. So let me show you a little bit of how it looks like. First, we have our homepage. In our homepage, we actually, as I said, we wanted this to be the daily point, right? Like, so the place that you as an engineer, you go in every day in the morning and then you figure out what's going on, that you figure out what do you need to do, what are the things that you need to focus on, how are your application health going, what kind of actionable things do you need to work on. And here you can see, for example, in the top part of the page, there is a pipeline activity. So this shows you the latest pipeline triggers that happen for all the applications that you and your team is owning, for example. And then you can see which open pull requests are there for you. That either requires you to review, or somebody added a comment, or you actually altered. So all the open pull requests are there. We also have things like, for example, latest vulnerabilities, open GitHub issues, and so on and so on. So we really made it like the central point where people would come back every day and say, okay, I have everything that I need to actually do my job today. Then we also have worked quite a lot into search. So today, for example, you can search across basically any information that we have in the company. So if you're looking for documentation, teams, applications, inactive applications, APIs, different resources, or different tooling. And we also have now recently just integrating the whole machine learning experience as well. Machine learning models and data pipelines are also becoming part of this big search. And I give you an example of how our search is looking today. So this is also one of our most used parts of our platform. And the engineers in Zalando really love this because they can, in one click, really find the information that they need. So if they need to start monitoring something in Python, then they can search for how to monitor in Python, and it gives the engineers really already the latest documentation. And we are working also on an integration with LLMs together with OpenAI to actually provide also a way to have generative AI together with all the information that we have, to really simplify this process of discovering information and also generating information that you might need as an engineer. Then we have also, an example here of when you see an application, you can actually see the owner of the application, what is the description, what it's doing, where can you find the actually source code of it, how can you find documentation, how can you raise issues. It's all interconnected into our search. You can search for APIs as well. So if you want to understand how do I connect into the cluster, into the Kubernetes cluster registry, you search for Kubernetes clusters, you go to APIs, and it gives you directly the information of the API specification, and you can see which methods are there, which are the specs that the application requires, and you can even test the API directly from the portal. And this also has some validation and some integration where we discover the APIs automatically. So when you actually deliver your software and you create an API and the spec is part of your repository, we automatically discover that during the deployment. and then we register this. So there is no extra or additional thing that anybody needs to do to actually publish an API. They just need the API spec to be part of their code. And this is also a very interesting piece that has been saving us quite a lot of time for when the delivering software. And you can see as well dependencies of the APIs, which were the latest services that consumed your such an API, and also which services are actually providing the API. We also have ways to sorry, one second. To see the application catalog in Backstage, you can see things from, for example, tier classification to ownership and search and filter by different levels. For example, Cyber Week is quite important for us as a company. We're a fashion, we're on the fashion industry. We sell clothes, we sell shoes. So Cyber Week is quite relevant. So understanding, okay, this application is relevant for Cyber Week. It's not. This application is actually ready from the engineering point of view. What is the health checks that it has? When was the last time that the application metadata was reviewed? All of that is also quite available straight ahead from the catalog page. You can also go deep into the application, and then you can see also some other interesting things. So we have ways to point applications to telemetry and observability resources if you want to check the monitoring dashboards for Kubernetes for the application, or the API monitoring, or understanding logs, or have a read on the traces, understand what were the latest anomalies triggered by Opsgenie or by any other alert system that we have. We have two more in Zalando. You can see this straight ahead from the overview page of an application. So if there is an incident, you can actually, from the central point, really understand, okay, what is the incident playbooks? You can see this. Who are the owners? How do I reach them? How do I escalate this if I need to as well? And we also have, for the application itself, we have ways to see the pipelines that are composing this application. In Zalando, one application can be composed of multiple pipelines, because some applications have, for example, cron jobs, or they have data pipelines, or they have different microservices in the same application. So you can see what is the state of the pipelines, what were the latest runs, what were they doing, did they fail, did they not? You can also see from this overview page, and which steps were actually triggered. You can also see, go deep into the continuous delivery platform, which is our platform for delivery of software in production cloud, and this all also integrated in Sunrise. So you can see actually logs, the deployment steps. You can see what were the infrastructure resources that were changed, what cloud formation stacks were executed. You can see which kind of ingresses were changed as well. So all of that is part of the Sunrise platform as well. So you can also have an overview of the pipeline and the deployments and so on and so on. You can also find documentation. And this is integrated through with MKDocs, so very similar with the Backstage general documentation system. What we have different from Backstage is that we also provide another entry point for documentation from non-technical people. So we have another visualization of the same documentation in MKDocs, for example. And the documentation is then written together with the software, and this is also discovered automatically whenever there is MKDocs artifacts being generated on a CI/CD pipeline. We automatically make the documentation discoverable, accessible, and searchable, all in one step without any additional requirements for registering documentation, or so on and so on. And then I mentioned a little bit about the API dependencies, but also on the application overview, you can see which APIs you are consuming as an application and which APIs you are providing. So for example, this application has multiple APIs that it's providing, and it has also multiple APIs that it's consuming, but also the part of events. So event streaming, the whole part of event streaming is also connected in our Sunrise platform, where you can see which events its application is consuming, but also which events it's providing, what is the cost, what is the actual availability, how is the averages in P50, P95, and P99 of sizes of the event streams, the cost, how many requisitions they are having, and so on and so on. What is the latency as well? And the multiple events that the application provides and the multiple events that the application is consuming. And here you can also find ways to actually edit or give authorization for certain events to be consumed by other applications as well. So that's why you see, for example, here there's an edit button. And then here we can do a little bit of authorization and indicate this event can be consumed by these applications. We also have, for example, a team overview where you can see how many applications does your team own, how many of them are cyber relevant, how many of them are requiring some sort of review, how many APIs you provide, how many documentation sites do you have, and who are the members of the team, who is the owner, what is the parent team, and so on. And you can also have an overview of the person where you can see what is their contact number, what is their email, how can you reach them, who are their leads, and which teams they are responsible for, and what do they do. We also provide a little bit of information on sync times and say, okay, these entities or this were synced in this date the last time, because there are some delays in actually syncing data, for example, from SAP and other data sources that we have for this information. We also have ways to how to create standard applications and utilizing standard templates. So you can go ahead and say, okay, I want to create a code repository. With a Python crawl job, you select the template and this generates automatically for you based on a series of requirements or information that you have. And this automatically creates a repository on GitHub with the template being executed together with a platform called Cookie Cutter. So I think our friends from coming after me, they will also talk a little bit about their template engine, which is much better than ours. Ours, we are still gonna work in improving that in this year and beginning of next year. We also have the whole part of machine learning pipelines and notebooks integrated in Sunrise. So for example, if you wanna create a machine learning project, you can see the latest runs, where did they run. For example, here I have a pipeline that was running Databricks, utilizing our internal Zflow library. And then you can also request or execute new runs or edit Jupyter notebooks directly in the UI as well, without having to interface with GitHub directly. So you can access GPUs and experiment with your machine learning pipelines directly from the web. This I could not show. I cannot show much more than what I'm showing right now, simply because I couldn't find a machine learning pipeline that were a little bit agnostic, and there were too many details. But giving a little bit of explanation of what this is doing as well. We also have a way where you can find, all the libraries and tooling that we provide as a central team to internally in Zalando. So you can find actually support. You can find documentation for all the standard tools that you should use in Zalando, and the same for like finding support and the technology choices through the tech radar, linking to our own documentation explaining why do we decide to adopt certain technology or not. And we also have a version of the tech radar in the open source if you're curious to see which kind of technology Zalando is using. So some of the challenges we had when introducing Backstage and in Zalando and some of the learnings we have. So some of the challenges we had were that we were a very small team. So all that I showed you was done through the contribution of many teams, but the core team was actually a very small team of 3 engineers and an engineering manager. The team was pretty much unfamiliar with TypeScript, so there was quite a bit of learnings on the technology as well. And we were also very early stage when utilizing Backstage. We were in 2020, Backstage was 1 month old when we actually started utilizing it, and Backstage was still under like very heavy development, and APIs were changing quite a lot. So we had to actually do a lot of throwaway code, temporary workarounds, and then refactoring afterwards. And some of the also like tooling and dependencies is that we had a very diverse tooling landscape in Zalando, and we actually had to minimize them as well so that we wouldn't not try to initially integrate everything, but what were our engineers in Zalando needing the most, or where were their pain points the most? What helped was that Backstage had a really nice community, and whenever we needed help, whenever we had questions, they were very supportive. The whole community was very engaged as well, quite responsive. We could actually, like after I think like 3 or 4 months, the core abstractions were very solid. So we could actually evolve the other plugins independently without many refactorings afterwards. And we had also like a very interactive development, sometimes doing 6, 7, 8 the deployments a day. And we have actually a very a space goal. So initially our goal was to integrate 20% of the engineering tooling landscape. We picked the most important ones, and then step by step we were increasing the adoption and the percentage of tools integrated, and those two grew together afterwards. And having actually this focus on 2 customer bases and giving a great developer experience for whoever is contributing to our instance of Backstage, and having a great experience for the engineers utilizing our instance of Backstage were actually very powerful, because we could see, for example, engineers that were using a certain part of the platform, and they were like, oh, there is a bug here. And then they would easily be able to fix bugs and correct the bugs even before opening support tickets for us, for example. So this was very powerful. Some of the learnings that we had is that like even with 3 people, we can actually deliver a lot of value utilizing Backstage because of the abstractions that it has, because of the amount of open source software that is there to actually start the foundation. It was also important to actually having a trust first approach whenever we had people contributing to our instance of Backstage, and really understanding, okay, they want to contribute, so they have the best interest at heart. And some of the DevOps engineers were not really used to, for example, front-end tooling and front-end UX, UI requirements. And having that common understanding and being very supportive and trusting each other was really helpful. But also providing like really a contribution guideline. Say, okay, this is how you contribute to our platform. This is how you can do it. These are UX UI guidelines. We're not gonna jeopardize that over speed. And really having that kind of like policies was also very important. And another key learning we had was that whatever we could automate, we automated, and that was also really important because then you can drive adoption quicker. But also introducing quality gates whenever you cannot automate things. So, for example, introducing a quality gate where you cannot deploy to production without having an application being a name registered with an owner was a very important quality gate that we introduced that also drives adoption and helps us having a healthier application landscape in Zalando. That's it, what I wanted to share with you today, but I'm also happy to, answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome, thank you, Levi. That was awesome. So we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to coalesce them. There's a couple questions related to how you manage the software catalog across teams and maintain uniformity. Can you talk about how you manage that at scale?
Is it about specifically about the consistency on the application metadata itself, or the visuals of the plugins where that composes the application catalog?
Yeah, given the other questions that are related to it, I think it's around the consistency of the metadata.
Okay, yeah. So the way that we actually tackle that was actually like as I said, trying to automate the most where we could. So I give you an example, right? Like, so all of our applications in Zalando are actually using the same open tracing system. So it doesn't make sense for us to have a requirement to say whenever you register your application, you also say which applications are dependent on your application, if we can actually look at open tracing and then get the information automatically, right? So we introduced a lot of this like collectors of information, and I think that's the right term from Backstage, where you basically try to get as much as possible the information automatically, and then you leave the application metadata very minimal, like literally name of the application, owner of the application, and that's it. Everything else we discover automatically. So that was actually what was key for us to maintain the quality really high level.
Awesome, interesting. There's another question around non-engineering users, and do they use Sunrise?
Yeah.
If so, like what do they use it for?
They're using Sunrise for searching information, especially around ownership, but also around quite a lot of like events around the search itself. So even like, for example, finding teams and who are the teams, and what they are doing, and the people itself, or who are the people in the teams, are like, we have quite a lot of traction, and that's where most of the known engineering teams are using the platform today. Basically to find the information that they need to, for example, do projects or reaching out somebody on a specific part of the Zalando product offering.
I have I guess my own follow-up question there. You seem to use it pretty extensively for documentation, and we've been tackling that problem at Autodesk, trying to find a standard way for us to be able to create and publish our documentation. Have you seen non-engineering people be able to use or leaning into the Git-based documentation workflow that powers MKDocs, or is
Yes,
it?
yes, we did, but this is also an area where we want to start providing is having a way where you can edit documentation directly on the platform. So that's something that we have plans to work on next year, where basically people could press an edit button in the Sunrise platform and then edit, and this would automatically open a PR to the owning team that owns the documentation.
Awesome, thank you. There's I guess another set of questions that I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, bring together. People are interested in the kind of arc of adoption, right? So what was that journey like, right? You roll out this platform and you don't have, or maybe a small set of users. And I think that when you sat there, that you said that around 60% of applications and components and infrastructure is in that. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that adoption arc and how that happened?
Yeah, so there were two parts of adoption, right? Like, so the first one, we wanted engineering teams to contribute, and that adoption we really tackled by, first of all, providing like a really good engineering experience. So our initial goal was to have 20%. So we identified, for example, we want to have integrated our CI/CD platform. We want to have integrated our infrastructure resources and Kubernetes clusters and so on. And we wanted to have integrated our cost insights, which I didn't show to you today. So we actually reach the teams individually and say, let's contribute together on this, and we subsidize some of the integrations together, especially in the beginning. So working with them and having, like, for example, a project team saying, okay, you give 2 people, I give 2 people, and then we do this together. And we have done that into 5 plugins that were key for us in the beginning. And this drove a little bit more adoption, because then it breaks the barrier of people and say, oh, actually utilizing Backstage is not that complicated. It's actually easy. The developer experience is great. I have my local environment set up in 2 minutes. I don't need to take care of the deployment. I open a PR, I merge the PR, it's deployed in less than 5 minutes. All of that were basically things that we wanted to have as a great experience. And this created some sort of organic growth as well, where we suddenly saw teams saying, oh, I want to introduce this new thing here. For example, the whole event streaming part, we didn't do any subsidizing there. The team came in and said, hey, I want to contribute, I want to be part of it. They can self-onboard and really, deliver the value.
So a little bit of a follow-up to that. There's another question talking about like kind of the plugins and the integrations that you've been able to provide. I know you were a pretty early adopter. So how much of that is Zalando specific plugins versus open community plugins? And then can you maybe step into a little bit of what those first 5 things were that you tried to provide to provide the value to get some type of gravity to attract your developer community?
Yeah. So the initial question was, can you repeat that, because I missed that one?
Yeah, so out of all the plugins and integrations that you've built, what percentage of those, or can you give us some type of characterization of how much of that is Zalando specific plugins versus leveraging community plugins? And then you mentioned that you focused on like 5 specific areas. Can you tell us what those were?
Yeah, absolutely. So the plugins that we have, the 36 I mentioned, are 36 self-built plugins. And these are pretty much very specific to Zalando. Some of them could have been open source, but the way that we implemented search technologies are very different from what the open source world is doing. Give you an example. For example, we have a plugin for GitHub, but our plugin for GitHub interacts with our GitHub Enterprise, and we give our plugin like superpowers so that people don't have to actually log in themselves into GitHub and in Sunrise, for example. We use our admin powers to actually do this. So that one, for example, we didn't open source that because of that. We use also open source plugins. I can name you a few. So the application catalog is being used, the open source one. We do have an extension of the Backstage catalog. We have also the Ops Genie. It's an open source plugin that we use, so we haven't built that ourselves. We have one open source plugin that we made it open source, for example, with the API linking. So there is quite a few open source plugins. I'm trying to find the number here, but I don't think I will be able to have it very easily. But I would say, let me see, around 10 different plugins are actually open source that we have today.
Awesome, thank you. There's another question here that's actually pretty interesting. So you have 63% you said of resources, and seems like you have a lot of engineering using Backstage. What are the barriers to getting to 100%? Is that a matter of functionality, or yeah, what are the challenges there?
So you mean like using Backstage or
Using Backstage, and then the 60% of applications that you said are represented in the catalog, yeah.
Yeah. So when I say 60% of the landscape integrated, I'm talking about like tooling that engineers need to actually do their job. But in terms of like the application landscape of Zalando, 100% of it is actually integrated in Backstage.
That makes sense. There's another question here related to what do I need to work on? So do you integrate with tools like Jira or Asana? Do your engineers actually use this to get insight into the next task that they need to do? Yeah.
Yes, we do have on the homepage of Sunrise, we have an integration with GitHub Issues and ZenHub. And we have an integration with Jira. So basically, we look at Jira tickets assigned to the engineer, so they know what is assigned to them on that page. But we don't try to replicate the project management tooling in Sunrise. We don't try to do that.
Awesome. Another question just came in that's a pretty technical question, but how do you manage the ecosystem of plugins with regards to, do they all live in one repository? Do you have that centralized team reviewing all of the plugins and guiding that development? How have you intersourced this ecosystem of plugins within Zalando?
Yeah. We have a monorepo, and on the monorepo, we actually have specific code owners for different parts of the code. And then we have rules that applies differently from the plugin that you're changing. And we also have, we are kind of like quality gating contributions, but mostly to ensure that the contributions are paying into our strategy and our vision as a platform.
Yeah.
And that's basically the overhead that the core team is taking then on then.
Yep. Awesome. So there's a couple questions here. People are interested about the CI/CD view that you have built within Backstage, and what's behind that. Do you have a standard CD platform across all these applications, and to what extent have you abstracted that platform away from a user experience standpoint inside of Backstage? Are people going through to another thing to actually get details, or do they pretty much just stay in Backstage to be able to integrate with their CI/CD pipelines?
Yeah, our CI/CD is 100% self-built. So that is the only interface that we have to interface with CI/CD.
Okay.
We do have another UI, which is a little bit more simpler for more like emergency access and things like that. But this is the most, this is the actual point to interface with CI/CD besides GitHub status.
Awesome. Sorry, it's refreshing. Oh, here's another question. So your previous developer portal that you built, that you say you had before Sunrise, was that something that was developed in-house at Zalando previously?
Yes, it was something that we built in-house, and it was built in 2015. And it lived until like we delivered our instance of Backstage in 2021.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much. This has been really impressive, and I've learned a lot, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late where you are, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for inviting.
Yep, awesome. All right, everyone, so we have a break now till 11:15, and when we get back from 11:15, we'll be hearing from Twilio. So see you in a bit.